still don't have a theme song. We don't have a theme song yet. Yeah. Hey everyone, and welcome to a new episode of And the Cineweb Goes To, or just, another Spinning the Cineweb video. As part of the series, it's time to do some awards predictions, and this is definitely one of my favorite times of the year, or I guess in terms of the awards year, movie year, it's early January. I don't know what you can really classify this as in terms of the year, but regardless, I always really enjoy predicting stuff for Oscars. I don't know why. I think after a certain point, I always enjoyed, the blockbusters going up, and then the Oscars was kind of like that intro into, more artsy-fartsy stuff, and then you start to get in deeper and deeper. But at the end of the day, the Oscars are what you think of as the Super Bowl of movies. It's the prestige of it all. It's the Oscars. It's the award to have when you think of an award other than a Pulitzer Prize. Lame. I want an Oscar. I want this guy. This isn't an Oscar. It's just a magnet. The Oscars this year are going to be quite interesting because and there's just so much going on with the industry per usual. I think this past year, has been recovery from the strikes from summer of 2023. And it's definitely been recovery for the industry as a whole. And right now, the industry itself is being wildly affected by the LA wildfires, which I believe are starting to settle down, but the damage is still vast. The firefighters have been doing a remarkable job. I know now a lot of people in Los Angeles, and I'm glad to say that I don't know anybody that has been super affected, but I'm sure maybe I'm forgetting somebody that has been affected. I will probably leave at least one link to some sort of resources down below on that, because it's definitely impacted the industry. It's going to impact the Oscars. It already has, because the day I'm recording this is past the original date for when the Oscar nominations were supposed to be announced. They were supposed to be announced this past Friday. Then they were pushed back to Sunday. And then it got pushed back again just because the wildfires have been a lot to maintain. So the voting for the Oscars nominations has officially ended by the Academy. So, and in this past week, I actually think quite a lot has happened to change the things. I believe we had the WGA noms, the PGA noms, pretty much all the guilds are now out and about, and I definitely think that might have affected some of the nominations. This award season is really crazy right now because I feel like compared to the last couple of years, where last year we had Oppenheimer as the clear front runner, then the year before we had Everything Everywhere All at Once. The year before that, I want to say we had there was a front runner for a while, and then Coda sort of took over. But we're after 2 years of a very clear front runner and two movies that did have an Oscars sweep. And this year, I think everybody can agree that there is no clear front runner for Best Picture. There's some categories that have front runners, but it is still a very wild open field. And I think that's made trying to think of all the predictions and seeing all the awards movies quite fun, just because you really don't know what could get in and might not get in. And I'm sure no matter what I end up predicting today, there's still going to be some surprises that get me and get a lot of other people. For your consideration, the show that I consistently watch for awards consideration, awards stuff, I love Perry Nemiroff, Scott Mans, who I got to meet in LA, Jeff Snyder. I take their predictions to heart. I've been reading the trades, seeing varieties and deadlines and Hollywood Reporter's predictions. And, some of that, I would always look in and I'd be like, that's, so, which is why I wanted to make my own video. It's time to get to my take. I have my iPad here with all my predictions written down. And to start off with the big boy, Best Picture, I still have right now at the number one seed, Anora, because I think it has been the movie that has been in the race the longest. It won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, and it has been steady throughout this entire race. It is a really great movie. I did get the chance to see it, and I mean, it's up there in my top 10, 15-ish area. Other movies have spiked and then dipped and then spiked and then dipped. Anora has been steady, and there's no way in my mind that it doesn't get a nomination, which is why I think it is my number one. It's the only reason it's my number one versus the number two, which I think personally, if, again, that point the gun to your head and who wins, it would be Anora or my number two, which is Wicked. I'm still pleasantly surprised to see how good this adaptation turned out. I have been able to see the Broadway show once in my life, which I am very grateful for. In both theater geeks and just regular moviegoers have been really enjoying Wicked. It is genuinely become something of a phenomenon in terms of the cinematic landscape. It really just took that popularity from Broadway, and it translated beautifully into film. I'm not worried about it being a one-part and two-part thing. If anything, the only thing I worry about is that I just didn't like the second half of the show as much. But what I do have faith in is John M. Chu, who is a wonderful director. He did In the Heights. He directed the ever-living crap out of this movie. He just made it as big of a, as big. There's so many emotions. There's a lot of layers to it. This movie's political, but also uplifting and depressing. Wicked really is a little bit of everything, and it's caught fire so much that it has a serious chance to win Best Picture. And I think that would just, something about that would feel right, especially because The Wizard of Oz somehow actually never won Best Picture. I believe it came out the same year as that little old movie Gone with the Wind, which, take what you may feel about that movie now, but back then, it probably is like a similar case of like a Barbenheimer, or like just two cases of they're both very legendary movies. Gone with the Wind just took that one. So I think Wicked winning would be very nice. I did really enjoy the movie. It's another favorite of mine this past year. So it's, I think, a very fitting number two. And to keep the musical train going on, my number three right now is Emilia Perez, which is one of the ones I have still not gotten the chance to see yet. It is a Netflix movie, so I haven't been able to see any screenings of it, but whether it's been back here in Philly or while I was in LA over the summer, I think it was way too early for that movie to come out. I've been seeing a lot of controversy amongst people my age on social media and just in general, and just in general with this movie. Not a lot of audiences are clicking with Emilia Perez, but the guilds, all the awards guilds, love this movie. I believe director's name, Jacques Audiard, he has made Hollywood films before. I believe he made The Sisters Brothers with Joaquin Phoenix and John C. Reilly a couple years back. I always heard great things about that. And this is caught on like fire. I know it made enough of a splash at the Golden Globes, which is the award ceremony I don't really like to talk about, but because I think the awards there are kind of crap. But the publicity of it is still why we talk about it. It's Netflix's obvious contender and frontrunner right now. And I think I heard someone say this, that it is probably Netflix's biggest chance to actually win Best Picture right now. And I think it's just, which is interesting. I'm still interested in the movie. I'm trying to drown out all the noise. I'm hoping to see it at some point soon, if for nothing else, so I don't get the songs spoiled on me. So I could, because what I like to do when nominations come out is I like to listen to the songs that get nominated. It's hard to say whether it'll happen or not, but Emilia Perez is in this race, whether you like it or not. It's an international movie in multiple regards. It's made in France. It takes place in Mexico. And this is Hollywood. The top five, and to be honest, 7, I feel pretty confident about. But the 5, I feel like I could see a reality where any number one of these movies end up winning Best Picture right now, because it is that wild open. Going to number 4, we have The Brutalist, which is another one I have not gotten the chance to see yet. It is a 3.5 hour dramatic epic from everything I've heard. I've heard nothing but great things. I've heard it's really like emotional. I've heard it's a very different second act, but I've heard the people that do connect to it really do connect to it. It's one of those movies that it's like it has like a powerful gut punch to it that, like, it's just like it's that awardsy feel type movie. But then I'm sure once I see it, it's like, oh yeah, no, I mean, I get it. I totally get it. I've heard so much praise for it. A24 acquired it. I want to say they acquired it during TIFF. I can't remember which festival they acquired it during, but either way, it's their biggest pony right now. A24 killing it as always, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it. I mean, it does seem like it's just going to be a really emotional story, like sad, gripping type of emotion. This is a very unique top 10 that I'm looking at right now, and The Brutalist definitely has a place with that classic, just epic type drama, because it is 3.5 hours. But from what I've heard, that if you take the time to sit down and watch it, which maybe some voters don't, that's whatever, it's still going to get a nomination. But I've heard that if you take the time to watch it, you'll be able to see why it is a Best Picture potential. I still don't know that much about the plot, other than that it's post-Holocaust World War II era, and that it almost acts as a sibling film to The Pianist, which won Adrian Brody his Oscar, and the other guy who we don't like to talk about. But yeah, it's firmly in the race. It's number 4. And what's also firmly in the race is another, like, I don't want to say cut and dry drama, but like it's just like good meat and potatoes drama. It's like what you just want in a good, tense, suspense-filled, Hitchcockian at points drama, which is Conclave. I did get to see Conclave. That is one that had a pretty like popular release, at least in terms of like the specialty releases. I saw it in a pretty packed theater, and from what I've heard, like a lot of people, that it's definitely catching on, I think, with the awardsy type movies more than something like The Brutalist or Amelia Perez. Those movies had incredibly limited releases. Nora and Conclave did definitely have some pretty significant, albeit still indie releases. Conclave is a movie that is relevant to this past election season. I think that could definitely reflect in voters' minds when thinking about the movie. It's a movie about, Christianity and the church, and just like a lot of tension with that. Nora, I know, is still definitely a little bit divisive. Wicked, I know most people really enjoy it, but I'm sure there are going to be haters and also people that just aren't into it being a musical. Same with Amelia Perez. The Brutalist is still very much like the people that love it really do love it, but then it might just be boring to some. Conclave, I really can't think of that many people that wouldn't enjoy it, especially within the Academy. It has good drama, good writing, good acting. It's Edward Berger's follow-up to All Quiet on the Western Front, which did incredibly well at the Oscars a couple years ago. Conclave is very firmly in this race. It's number 5 right now, but maybe with enough time, it could move even higher up. So that released around October, November, I want to say. And we're going to rewind the clock quite a bit to the movie that was probably the first movie that everybody thought was going to get a Best Picture nomination. And it has stayed in this race. It's the movie that has had Timothée Chalamet staring at me, and is going to be staring at me for the Dune Part 2 ticket I have, which is Dune Part 2. It's a sequel to an already beloved adaptation. I think it's one that a lot of people most people generally agree that it's better. I liked it slightly more than the first, and I thought the first one was already really good, but Dune Part 2 really was great. I mean, it made a big splash at the box office. It was the first movie to have like a good box office success. It has a lot of weight to it, and it has been in this race. It has been like holding out strong. It was supposed to release in 2023 and would have made it for a very interesting awards race if this came out at the same time as Oppenheimer, where they're like competing for a lot of technical awards. And because of how long it's been in the race, it's definitely dipped its chances. I'm sure there was absolutely a point where people thought this movie could win Best Picture. I guess that in reality still isn't impossible. I think the other movies have progressed further in the race to where I think that outcome is unlikely. But there's no way it's not getting nominated. Warner Brothers, it's really Warner Brothers' big awards movie. Joker crashed and burned critically and at the box office. Furiosa, I adore that movie, but it did not do super well at the box office. They've flubbed it up with Juror Number 2, which I hear is great. But, like, they decided for Clint Eastwood's maybe one of his last movies, we're just going to give it the worst release strategy ever. So I haven't seen that movie. Not a lot of people have seen that movie. It's Warner Brothers' biggest chance. So they have put all their chips on the table for this. And it's getting a guaranteed nomination for that. Not intentionally moving from one Timothée Chalamet movie to the other, which just goes to show just how much of a movie star he is right now. And a genuinely great actor, we'll get to that again later, is A Complete Unknown. This is the Searchlight contender for the year. I'm trying to think. They have a couple other movies that are definitely in contention to maybe get a Best Picture nomination. I don't feel like this is a year they would win, unlike with Nomadland or The Shape of Water or some other really great movies that they made over the years. But, I mean, it's a Bob Dylan movie. It is Timothée Chalamet playing Bob Dylan. It's a James Mangold movie. James Mangold is an awesome director. I love Logan. Ford v. Ferrari is so good. I really like the last Indiana Jones that he did. But, I think all of it is that perfect storm, the Christmas release, Bob Dylan music biopic. People generally really like it. It's getting in there. It's pretty safe. I don't think it has enough pull to win. I almost forgot about it when I was forming my list, but then I was like, wait, how did I forget about this? And then it moved all the way up to 7. I still think it's pretty firmly in the race to get a nomination. I would be shocked if it didn't get a nomination. I believe it's this upcoming Thursday that nominations are coming out. Now we get to the bottom 3 of my Best Picture list, which is a very, very tough divide. A lot of movies vying for these. I'm actually going to say that my number 8, I'm going to do a slight flip from what I have written down, because originally I had my number 8 as a different movie, but I'm going to say that my number 8 prediction is The Substance, a horror movie that has attracted so much attention. It has the word of mouth like nothing else that I've seen this season. Like, everybody who's seen The Substance has begun like, oh, have you seen The Substance yet? And whether you love it or not, because this movie makes some bold choices that are definitely going to make some people, I mean, it's supposed to make people feel uncomfortable, but it just makes some very bold and stark choices, but it's caught on like wildfire. Mubi acquired this movie, which I think is a fascinating choice for a distributor, but it has paid off for them. And then some. They had a very good limited release in September, and this movie has stayed the conversation. I believe it won something at Cannes. I believe it was the Screenplay Award. It's getting a lot of attention for Demi Moore. It's been a very good year for horror, and this movie especially, it talks about a lot of just things about, women's just having to, present themselves in a certain way, especially in the industry. And I think it's a movie that I think has just stayed the course. I know it's on the bubble more compared to some of the other movies, but I still think it is a pretty firm chance to get this movie in the Best Picture. It's gotten past the point of the genre, the fear that I think a lot of people have had. And at one point I was like, wait, so are The Substance and Nosferatu going to cancel each other out? I don't really think so at this point. I think The Substance has been in the race longer, and Nosferatu is great, but The Substance has been in the race longer, and I think it has really captured something that definitely has captured a very Get Out sense of a very universal appeal, which is why I bring Get Out back up, because it just had a very broad appeal. It was a great movie, and that movie lasted quite a long. I think that released early in the year, and they were still able to get a Best Picture nomination. I think that's the last major horror movie to get a Best Picture nomination. Genre, you could argue with things like Shape of Water or Everything Everywhere All at Once. But either way, I think The Substance is pretty safe. I would be surprised and, quite frankly, very disappointed if it does not get this nomination, especially with some of the other nominations I think it could get, because this movie is still going to get nominations, no matter if it gets Best Picture, or it's in this race. And my number was 8, is now 9, is a movie that has another movie from the summer, I want to say, that has stayed the course. I think it premiered at the festival year beforehand, and then it's just kind of how it goes sometimes. And it's another A24 movie. It is one I just saw the other day. That is Sing Sing. I was expecting to really enjoy this movie, and I was blown away with it emotionally, the way it captures the story of these prisoners trying to rehabilitate through theater therapy, basically. And I think it is a very, it's probably like the sappiest movie on this list. I can't think of a lot of movies. I guess you could say Wicked is sappy at points, but Wicked is also a lot of different things. Sing Sing is a movie that's like, hi, do you need a tissue box? Here, we'll just hand you one right before you walk into the theater. It's had a very limited release, but it has stayed in the conversation. Coleman Domingo is definitely in the running for Best Actor. And I think because of that, I still think it has a very good shot to get in for Best Picture. This is one I don't think it made the PGA list, nor did The Substance. But all the other movies I listed before these last two did make the PGA noms. So it's going to be a very, I won't be too shocked if it doesn't get in, especially compared to The Substance. I think that's why I made that flip in my head. Now on to 10, which I think is a very wide open spot. Yeah, I think I'm still going to go with Nickel Boys, which is a movie I admittedly don't know too much about. I believe it's based off a true story. I know Ingenue Ellis Taylor's in the movie. I know it's an Amazon MGM movie. It's catching the awards race pretty well. I think it had a decent limited release. I hear pretty good things, generally speaking. I think the fact that it's Amazon MGM, which I'm still don't like saying it that conglomerate title. It's Amazon MGM's probably their biggest movie in the race at this point. I think it has enough favor to get in, so that's why I have it in as my number 10. It was a PGA nomination movie, and I think that does lend some credence. I believe it got a WGA nom as well. I have Nickel Boys as my number 10, and time to get to the honorable mentions. And the movie that I was really fighting to not put in was a movie I've heard a lot about from Scott Mann's September 5, which is a movie about the Olympics Israel bombings. I can't remember the specifics of the story. From what I understand, it's a similar story. It's the same events that Munich was about, but from the perspective of the newsroom, which I think is pretty interesting. There's obviously going to be some relevance with this movie politically. I believe it's Paramount's. Paramount acquired it, and I think at this point it became their biggest awards contender, because I still have Gladiator 2 as an honorable mention, but that movie, I think people were predicting it to be Dune Part 2 level and to be a genuine contender for all the big things. And I think at first it got enough good praise, but then I think just kind of dwindled, and it's definitely, at one point in time, I thought Gladiator 2 was was an easy lock to get nominated. But at this point, it's fallen out of favor enough now that I don't see it getting in. I see September 5 as more likely as that smaller niche movie that some Academy members could cling to. I'm thinking Triangle of Sadness, of that kind of came out of nowhere. Some honorable mentions: the other Searchlight movie I mentioned, A Real Pain, Jesse Eisenberg's movie. He did a very good job with this movie. I know some people that really loved it, and I was just a tad below that, but I still really enjoyed it. I think it's a lock in one other category, and it still has a very good chance. I believe it was a Sundance movie from last year, and I can't think of many of the other movies in this race that are Sundance movies, so it could have that going for it. Only Imagine as Light, which is a very small movie that I really don't know that much about, but I've seen it on enough awards lists. I still need to see it myself. It's probably going to be like one of those movies that's like, if it gets in, then it's like, oh, okay, this is prompting me to see it. Whereas a lot of the other movies I've been trying to see, thinking / knowing it'll get in. This movie, if I see it, it'll probably be because it gets in. I wrote down like both Nosferatu and The Wild Robot. I put like a parentheses there because right now Universal has Wicked, just with Universal in general, and then Focus Features with Conclave. Nosferatu is also Focus Features, so it's under that umbrella. DreamWorks is owned by Universal, so I think that's just going to be very tough for those movies that have that, like Universal like has two big ponies. They had that similar case going on last year with Oppenheimer and The Holdovers, and I think it'll make it tough for Nosferatu and The Wild Robot, even though they're both very deserving movies. I particularly love The Wild Robot. I want to mention those as an offside chance, and it would be crazy if we got Nosferatu and The Substance both nominated. It would be an awesome year for genre fans. It already has been. As it stands, right now my 10 predicted nominees for Best Picture are Anora, Wicked, Emilia Perez, The Brutalist, Conclave, Dune Part 2, A Complete Unknown, The Substance, Sing Sing, and Nickel Boys. And time to move on to what I think as like the second biggest one. Some people would say it's Best Actor or Best Actress. I like to think, well, let's talk about the people that made these movies first, and that's Best Director. Like Best Picture, this is a very wild open field for who could get in, and obviously less wild open just for who could win, because there's fewer nomination slots, which I think is why I'm going with the safe bet for number one as Sean Baker for Anora. I mean, he did a great job directing this movie. I mean, he won the Palme d'Or for this movie, and the last movie to do that and win Best Picture was Parasite, so that's a pretty good track record. It's the same distributor with Neon, who always, like, Neon at this point is probably on a similar level of A24 with the types of movies that they produce to small but big small niche audiences, and Nora has stayed in this race. Sean Baker did an awesome job with that movie. Nobody can deny that. Even if you don't necessarily care for this movie, he still directed the crap out of this movie, and I'm not sure about his chances for winning, but I still think there's no way that he doesn't get nominated. I would be shocked if he didn't. Number two, I would say, is Brady Corbett for The Brutalist, who I think, from what I've been reading from Variety's predictions list, I think he's the predicted winner. Probably because, I mean, it is a big, grand, epic. From what I understand, it asks a lot of the actors, so probably has that going for it. The Brutalist, I've heard, is a very pretty movie. Anora is definitely a great looking movie, but The Brutalist has just a wider scope, so that could definitely lend him some credence. I remember at first when award season was starting, I didn't really know that much about The Brutalist, and now it's like I know quite a lot about it. Another person who could sneak up to win, and I think is a pretty safe nomination, especially given the international contingent, is Jacques Audiard. I believe that's how you say his name, for Emilia Perez. Again, whether you like it or don't like this movie, Emilia Perez is in the race. The international committee, like the Academy, has changed a lot over the years, and I think the biggest signs of change have been in the international branch. People have snuck into this category from international films before. Last year we had Zone of Interest, and then I'm forgetting the other. It was Neon. It was the other international movie that wasn't. I think it was France's movie, but it wasn't their movie for an international feature. But then they got a Best Picture nomination. Go figure. This time, this is France's submission for international feature, and it's Jacques Audiard. So I think the international committee alone is going to get him in for this movie. I'm sure the people that don't like Emilia Perez are not going to like this choice, but at this point, it's firm enough in the race. You're just going to have to deal with it. I'm sorry. The other two picks I have are definitely the ones that I don't think are locks. 3 are locks, and I'm taking a bet with having one person not on this list. But number 4, I don't know how he isn't a lock to get in. It's John M. Chu for Wicked. I I don't see how you see a movie like that, and with the choices he makes, with how much he has to do with telling that story, with how much I've heard he's like poured his love, and like that set, like everything like you've seen from interviews and behind the scenes clips, there was so much love on that set. He is such a good leader, which is just everything that you would think for a great director. And Wicked is a Best Picture contender. It might win. Is it going to be the first movie to win Best Picture without a Best Director nomination? No. But I think he is very worthy. I mean, Wicked's box office and the fact of how fresh it is could get him in this race. He's an Asian filmmaker making this movie, and that's just not a big deal, and I love that. Wicked is the big movie that I think, the big movie that could win it all. So by proxy, I'm really hoping he gets in, which is why I have him in at my number 4. And I still do think it's very likely, given the amount of things that is going on with Wicked. And again, how I've always heard he's a great, great leader. Number 5 is like definitely somebody who could sneak attack into this. But at this point, I don't want to see another Oscars Best Director category without any female directors in it. And at this point, I think The Substance has enough of the juice in the race to get Coralie Fargret. If you're watching this, Coralie, I loved your movie, and I'm so sorry I mispronounced your name. And that's coming from the guy with the last name Angelopoulos. I think you are getting a Best Director nomination. I'm going to be very happy about it. It kind of reminds me of Promising Young Woman getting in for Best Director. That year we had 2 women in Best Director. What? Shocking. Her choices with this movie are so distinct, so bold. It is a directorial feat, and I think it's going to be hard to deny her. She's going to get a Best Screenplay nomination, as are a lot of these other movies are probably going to get screenplay nominations as well. I think she could just sneak in there because, again, The Substance has been staying in the race pretty well, so it's been staying in people's memories. And when you think of that movie, it's like, who else made the bold choices to tell that story the way it was told, and with the level that it goes to with the horror and the body horror that Coralie Fargret took. The person who everybody else probably has a lock, and is my first honorable mention, and I would not be disappointed if he did get in, especially since he was stumped for his previous Oscar movie, Edward Berger. He didn't get in for All Quiet on the Western Front, which in hindsight is kind of shocking. For Conclave, most people have him in, and don't get me wrong, I won't be surprised if he does get in. I won't be disappointed if he doesn't get in. I'll be disappointed that the last 2 don't get in, but I won't be disappointed that Edward Berger is nominated. Conclave is still a huge movie. It's a more guaranteed nomination for Best Picture than The Substance, which is a bigger ask. It's still a very well-directed movie. Sure, The Substance is bolder and more out there. I mean, Conclave, it reminds me a lot of A Few Good Men, or not A Few Good Men. Well, I guess A Few Good Men in some instances, but namely 12 Angry Men is what it reminded me a lot of. So he's still incredibly likely for this race. Another big film director who got snubbed on the last one, similarly, but this time he is still on the bubble just because Dune Part 2 came out last March, and Denis Villeneuve did direct the crap out of this movie, and it would be crazy to me to see John M. Chu and Denis both get in, they're very different types of big movies, but they're both like the directors who made the big movies that made a lot of money and people really loved them. And Denis does have at least a Best Director nomination to his name, but I think it's just tough. It's a really tough field to crack into. Again, I won't be disappointed, but right now I just have him getting snubbed, which feels like a shame, but it's just a tough category. I mean, Edward Berger is already a snub, and for the top 3, I just don't see them getting off. So it's just, those bottom two slots are really the ones that are open. Going on to the rest of my honorable mentions, which isn't too many. James Mangold for A Complete Unknown. I, again, love James Mangold. He did get a DGA nomination, which definitely lends a lot of credence to him potentially getting in, because people might have seen, oh, James Mangold got an in. Let me nominate him for Best Picture, all that jazz. I think it would be his first Best Director nomination. Do I think it's his best movie? No, but I wouldn't be disappointed, and I wouldn't be disappointed to see him in. Another woman with Payal Kapadia for All You Imagine Is Light. I really don't know that much about this movie, but this movie is in enough of the lists that I'm seeing, and it could be like that small international contingent that just pushes her into this race. So she could be like, so that's, I definitely think, why I want to mark her down. And I think that's it for Best Director, where I have predicted Sean Baker, Brady Corbett, Jacques Audiard, John M. Chu, and Coralie Farragut. A lot of this is very open to change. I don't know exactly who's going to get nominated, but these are who I hope, and also think are most likely. Time to get into the acting categories. I think this one, is more safe on the most of the nominees predicted to get in. Now, for who wins, I think it's a little bit more open. Right now, I think as number one, I have Ray Fiennes for Conclave. Number two is Adrian Brody for The Brutalist. Those are probably like 1 and 2. Like, a lot of flipped on a lot of people's lists. Adrian Brody has won before. Ray Fiennes hasn't won before. I can't judge The Brutalist performance. I can judge Conclave, and I think he did an awesome job. Conclave is just a movie with a lot of pressure, but then a lot of the people towards the top, like Stanley Tucci, Ray Fiennes, Isabella Rossellini, who we'll get to later, who just like try to keep it calm as much as possible, and you can see the pressure that's being held upon him. You can see like the emotional toil, because he did have a connection with the Pope that died and bestowed upon him this order of being the conclave, or of issuing the conclave. I don't know. I'm forgetting all the words with the Catholic Church. Forgive me. It's hard to say who will win right now. If I had to guess, I would say Ray Fiennes, because I think he gave a great performance. I think Conclave is a really good actors movie where everybody really does bring their A game in. It's not getting ignored by any of the guilds. I don't think it's any different here, which is why I think Ray Fiennes is my number one. Adrian Brody is my number two. Again, from what I've heard, it's a very powerful performance. I can't judge it. I haven't seen The Pianist either. I'm trying to think of the last thing I've seen Adrian Brody in, but it has been a while, so this could be a very good comeback movie for him. Number three, I'm going to say Timothée Chalamet for A Complete Unknown. When I was seeing people, this movie getting screened, I saw a lot of people saying Timothée Chalamet is winning that Oscar, and it's hard to say whether or not he will. I think there's a pretty decent shot. I think the three right now have, I'd say, the best shots of winning, and I could see a reality where Timothée Chalamet wins, because playing Bob Dylan, who's such an enigmatic person, is so hard, and he did do a phenomenal job. I don't know if he would be my personal pick to win, but I would be happy, though, if he did win, because I also just think he's a phenomenal actor in general. I mean, I'm still surprised at the range of going from playing Willy Wonka to playing Paul Atreides to Bob Dylan in all such a short span of time in the grand scheme. Like, people have tried to put Timothée Chalamet in a box, and I think he successfully stayed out of that box, but also in people's minds, because he's a global superstar right now. He's one of the best. I really do think he's one of the best young actors working today. I mean, you can see why he's a star, and he's an awards baby. I mean, so that's why he's getting in. And yes, he's playing Bob Dylan, which certainly helps. But who's a very famous musician, Rami Malek, won for playing Freddie Mercury a couple years ago. I believe Jamie Foxx for playing Ray Charles. There's a history with it, but on top of that, he just gave a great performance. I wouldn't even be disappointed if he got nominated for In a Different Reality, Paul Atreides for Dune Part 2, because he really does act the crap out of that role in that movie. But moving on to number 4 is somebody who has, whether the movie itself, as I mentioned, is definitely on the bubble to get in for Best Picture, but Coleman Domingo is pretty safe for Sing Sing. He is awesome. He's coming off of his past nomination for Rustin. Yeah, I think that's what it was. He's a Temple alum. Woohoo! A queer, openly queer actor getting nominated again, which is awesome. And again, I did just see the movie the other day. I think personally, I would probably peg him to win because he is extraordinary in that movie. He has so much, like, you just want to give him a hug. He's holding so much in to where there's one moment in the movie where he lets it out and it's just like, oh man, that's just, it gets you emotional thinking about it, and that's the type of goods that gets him another Oscar nomination. Those 4, I think, are pretty dang safe. 5, there's a lot of room for interpretation. I remember at one point, Paul Mescal was in the race for Gladiator 2. And don't get me wrong, he's a great actor, but Gladiator 2 has fallen out of this race. And so, I've heard he's okay in the movie, but definitely is not going to follow up Russell Crowe in that regard. So right now, at number 5, I have a movie that is pretty much going just for the nomination for Best Actor. And if it gets in, it will be for this. And it will be Daniel Craig's first nomination for Queer. It's another Luca Guadagnino movie, which he had 2 this past year with Queer and Challengers. Challengers was delayed because of the strikes. And if Challengers was later in the year, I think it would be up for a lot more categories. But as it stands, Daniel Craig for Queer, I've heard like it's interesting, not sure how people feel about the movie, but there's still a lot of interesting things going on. So it's a Luca Guadagnino movie. What do you expect? It's definitely not as beloved as Challengers, but the one thing, and that's why it's the whole campaign is circling around him, the one thing that everybody agrees with is Daniel Craig is awesome. He is a terrific actor. I will be very happy to see him get this nomination. The honorable mentions, the first name that I think is going to be, at this point, on a lot of people's minds, is Sebastian Stan. And I think the thing that keeps him out is the fact that he has 2 potential movies with another A24 movie. We have 3 A24 movies in there right now with, let's see, The Brutalist, Sing Sing, and Queer. A Different Man is another A24 movie, so that would just flip out with Daniel Craig, I suppose. I hear he's great in that. I also hear he's great in The Apprentice, where that one, if he did get in for that one, there's an obvious political angle, and I think that definitely helps nudge that one in. But I think there's enough contention between both of his performances that even despite like the temptation, and it's still very likely that he could get a nomination for playing Donald Trump, the president who is a criminal. Right now, I think they're going to be butting heads, and I won't be like, it's not necessarily a political choice to not have him in. It definitely is if he gets in for playing Trump, but I don't know if that's the reason that's pushing him out of Best Actor. I think right now it's a very tough field, and I think his 2 contending performances might have voters split, so then they'll go for something like, safe like Daniel Craig for Queer, which who knows how many Oscar voters have actually seen that movie, or even The Apprentice, or A Different Man. All those movies had pretty small runs, but it's very much a case of he just has 2 great performances that could work against him, and there's already a lot of other great performances in the race. Going on to the other 2 honorable mentions, which I don't have a ton for this category, because I really do think it's between, like, it's 4 people that are locks, and then a lot of contention for the 5 spot, but actually not that much in the grand scheme. Hugh Grant for Heretic, which I'm surprised that he's in the race. I thought that was like an A24 horror movie, and it's another A24 movie that was like going to be like, a more popular one, like gets like that, good like horror small box office, but like, and he's great in the movie, and I don't think I love it as much as like some other people do, but like I'd be happy if he got in. It would be surprising because it's a very interesting performance. I think if he gets nominated for that, and he's in the bubble, so I think there's a very good chance. The only other person I've written down, and he's great in the movie, it's Jesse Eisenberg for Real Pain. I think the other acting attention is going towards his co-star. And also, he wrote the movie, he directed the movie. People might not want to give him even more credit, especially because like this movie isn't catching like that Bradley Cooper energy of like he just does great job all around. Like when people think of A Real Pain, I think right now they're thinking of the way that movie is written and it may be directed. He did a very good job directing the movie, but I think not enough people are clinging to his performance. Not that it's a bad performance. Jesse Eisenberg is a great actor. He's a former nominee, but I think that's just what keeps him out right now. And that's my 5 for Best Actor: Ralph Fiennes, Adrien Brody, Timothée Chalamet, Coleman Domingo, and Daniel Craig. Whew. This is tough. This is getting tough. We're moving on to Best Actress now, where right now I think just because of that general I don't see how people from Anora get snubbed momentum is Mikey Madison for Anora. And she is awesome in this movie. She gives one heck of a performance. With a lot of people pointing out her beats in the ending are incredibly powerful. I don't want to spoil it too much, even though a lot of people are talking about it. I heard about it beforehand, and then when I saw it, yeah, it's some powerful stuff. But the rest of her performance is still very worthy. She is not afraid at all to do all the stuff that is required with this role and takes in the intensity. She takes in quite a lot with this movie, and ultimately you can't take your eyes off of her, which sounds bad when you think of it in a certain context. In terms of her performance, you can't take her eyes off. You can't take your eyes off her, and I think that's why she's the number one. I don't know if she will win, but I don't see how she gets snubbed, and that's why she's my number one to get nominated. Same with Cynthia Erivo for Wicked, who is already a surprise nominee for, I believe it's Harriet, where she also got an original song nomination because she's a songwriter. And yeah, she's also awesome in Wicked. I mean, with Wicked, there's just so many things going on. And I guess I was never expecting her performance to be bad. So when it's like, oh yeah, she's awesome in the role. Like, I guess like maybe it's, I don't know, like it's the type of like when so many things are shiny around you and when you're expecting one thing to be shiny, like you're focusing on the other things that are like, oh, that thing is shinier. Like, that's the thing with Wicked. It's a spoiling of goods, and Cynthia Erivo is at the head of that. She does do an awesome job with this movie. I'm really glad. Once I saw the movie, I was like, casting a woman of color in that part, I think was a very smart choice. I think that lends a lot of power to the underlying subtleties and notes behind her performance. I think because of that, because it's such a big role, preceded by a very notable actress, Idina Menzel. I mean, it's a role that's had a lot of hands passed over the years on stage, and yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that could lend credence to her winning. I guess it's just hard to say. I think right now for this category, I just need to see the season move along further before I can confidently say who will win. What I saw for Variety's pick, and I think it's why she's my number 3, is Demi Moore for The Substance. I think this is a case where, like, even the people that are like iffy on the movie from the genre perspective, from the body horror perspective, I think they won't be able to ignore that when it comes to her performance, because she just recently won the Golden Globe, and again, the Golden Globe Awards are dumb, but her publicity that she got from it, like, of the kind of that Brendan Fraser energy of thank you for remembering me, I think lends a lot to her. I mean, that definitely boosted her momentum up in the race, and she is awesome in this movie. She really does take on quite a lot, and if she ends up being the one who wins, I really don't I wouldn't be disappointed at all. I suppose I see a reality where people are too grossed out by The Substance to get her the nomination, which is why I don't think she's a lock. Like, as safe as a lock as Mikey Madison or Cynthia Erivo. And maybe my number 4, but I think she's still very firmly in this race. Number 4, I have the first trans woman to get a nomination, which makes me happy, is Carla Sofia Gascon. I hear she's amazing in Emilia Perez. What I hear with that is that Zoe Saldana is really the lead, but the movie is about Carla Sofia Gascon, which is probably why they put her in Best Actress, similar to Lily Gladstone from last year. So I think that energy could give her a lot of goodwill for Amelia Perez. I mean, it'd be cool to see a trans woman win the Oscar for Best Actress. I don't feel like it's going to happen right now. I think, again, there's a lot going on with Amelia Perez. And again, despite what the public might think about that movie, Amelia Perez is still going for quite a lot in the awards race. So I think it's just a little bit hard to say. Number 5, I'd say, is a pretty open slot. And there's one person I really fought hard not to put in, my personal bias to put in. But ultimately, I have to put in, Nicole Kidman for Baby Girl? Oh no, Nicole Kidman, that random actress who speaks the AMC Pledge of Allegiance. Despite that, you forget all that when you see her in Baby Girl. Actually, maybe you don't forget about it because of how much I've seen that promo, but with how good she is in Baby Girl, because she commits to that performance and to that movie, she is, I'd say right now that campaign is mostly focused on her, but people really do like the movie. There's a very easy appeal to see why people would like this type of story of a woman just falling into this type of circumstance that a lot of people might find just relatable in a subconscious level. And I think that's kind of a lot of what it is going on. It's her just struggling with that image of power and being a female CEO and just being do I go for what I want? Is what I want wrong? There's a lot going on there, and I think the Christmas release date really helped. I think it did pretty good with the specialty box office. So yeah, I'm really hoping Queen Nicole gets in. I won't be disappointed to see her in, but I think my first honorable mention, if she gets in, I'm gonna scream to the ends of the earth, and that is for June Squibb for Thelma. Now, keep in mind, I do have, some bias because I was lucky enough to meet the directors and the producers of Thelma at the Q&A screening, Squibb. I met Josh Manglin, and the producers back in LA. I mean, they were so incredibly kind, but trust me when I say this is a movie I would have loved anyway. And the fact that June Squibb really pours her heart and soul into this role, I think because the movie right now I think a lot of it is focused on her. I think she would be the oldest Best Actress nominee, which would be another cool record to break. She is awesome in the movie. It is an action comedy, so it would be a comedic performance getting in. Is it as much of a lot compared to all these other flashy names? No. But I think there's been enough groundswell momentum to give June Squibb a fighting chance. Angelina Jolie for Maria. I don't know too much about this movie. Angelina Jolie, obviously a great actress. Maria, I believe it's the same person who directed Spencer and Jackie, who both got Kristen Stewart and Natalie Portman nominations. So that gives credence. It's Angelina Jolie. I don't hear a lot of people talking about the movie. I hear more people talking about Baby Girl than I do Maria. But she could still get in because she's Angelina Jolie. And lastly is a movie I really don't know too much about, but I'm seeing some things pop up. Pamela Anderson for The Last Showgirl. She did get a SAG nomination, which I think definitely boosts her chances. I just don't know that much about the movie, and I'm not hearing enough about it in general. So that's just why I just don't have her on this list. Mikey Madison, Cynthia Erivo, Demi Moore, Carlos Sofia Gascon, and Nicole Kidman for Baby Girl. Those are my Best Actress predictions. Now on to Supporting Actor, which is the only acting category that I feel confident in saying Kieran Culkin for A Real Pain will win this award. I mentioned it earlier that this movie is meant to, you're meant to fall in love with this character. It's a pretty big performance, but obviously Jesse Eisenberg is a protagonist, so they were able to get with that. It would be a risk if he campaigned for Best Actor for him to potentially win, but ultimately there's enough to say he is a supporting performer in this movie, and yeah, he's great. I think A Real Pain really is designed to to make you fall in love with that character, all warts and all. There's a lot of flaws to this character. There's a lot to love about this character. There's a lot to this character. A lot of it, people have said, is similar to Kieran Culkin as a person. No matter what, doesn't matter. He acts his ass off. Your eyes are glued. If that character walks into other movies, he's still a contender for Best Supporting Actor, because he's just that good. I think right now, I think and A Real Pain it definitely has a good shot because people really like that movie. But I think all of its momentum is benefiting Kieran Culkin so much, and he's the only one that it's like out of all of them, it's like that is an Oscar-winning performance. I find it very hard to believe that he doesn't win the Oscar. He's already won an Emmy for Severance, and I think now he's going for that Oscar, and I'm not going to be disappointed. I think he's the only one right now with a lock to win, because I'm looking at these other nominees, and and granted, some of them I haven't seen the movies, but that's the thing, is that I just find it hard to believe with a performance like that Kieran Culkin does not come home with an Oscar. And we are moving to Searchlight from number 2. Really, the rest of this list is pretty wide open, because for the supporting acting categories, there are a lot of great players, as there usually is. Right now, I have Edward Norton for A Complete Unknown, who is, like, when I saw the movie, I was really surprised by how much you really found endearing about this character, which I'm thinking of the last movie I've seen him in, which is Glass Onion. Very different performance, great performance. But, the opposite of endearing, whereas here, aside from some moments towards the end, he's completely endearing, and even then, he's just somebody who brings a warmth blanket type of energy. I feel like this, without his character and without his sensitivity in this movie, which I think is really nice to see a male actor expressing that sensitivity in that gentle sort of way, I think that lends a lot of credence to him getting a nomination, and it's Edward Norton, so obviously that helps. Coming in at number 3 is somebody who's definitely isn't like a huge name, and is definitely a much more subtle performance than something like Kieran Culkin's, but Yura Borisov for Anora. When you're probably seeing Anora for the first time, you're probably not thinking like, oh wow, like who is that guy? But he has such a memorable character. He is also a part of the movie's powerful ending, and he has such subtle notes in the movie, and I think that's he is the subtle train that could with this season and his performance. I think he's getting all the Anora momentum. There is for the actor who plays the actual like Russian like kid who falls in love with Anora. He's not that character, and I'm forgetting the name of that other actor who is also great and gives a lot into that. That's obviously a lot more of a showy performance. And if Yura Borisov doesn't get in, it's because they both are conflicting with each other. Maybe the other actor does get in. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting his name, but they're all Russian names and it's hard to pronounce. But either way, Yura Borisov for Anora has a very, 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 very grounded performance. And it's the type of thing that people are just, it's like Anora is far enough in the race that like people are not going to care that he's not a star, and they're just going to see the work, and they're going to see like, wow, when your eyes do drift to him, like it's like he's just doing a lot with a little. And I think that's something that not a lot of the actors have going on right now. And then I think the bottom 2 are pretty open. There's a lot of people vying for these last couple spots. I have Denzel Washington for Gladiator 2 at 4. Again, Gladiator 2 has lost a lot of momentum, but when you hear the name Denzel Washington, you don't just go, oh, who's that? So I think he has that type of energy like Robert De Niro in Killers of the Flower Moon last year, where it's like, he's Denzel, we got to give him the nomination, right? And he's gotten that before. He's gotten nominations for movies that people don't expect because he's Denzel Washington. People, for a while, thought he was going to win this category. I definitely don't think that's a possibility right now. And there's a very real possibility he doesn't get in because there are a lot of other actors vying for this Best Supporting Actor. Maybe they'll just go for other movies that just are clicking more with voters. But ultimately, and I hear, since he is generally one of the best parts of that movie, that lends a lot of credence. I hear it's Denzel Washington. They're gonna like being able to say, yeah, we got Denzel here. It's like, it's like that joke I remember Kimmel making. It's like, Spielberg, do you have season tickets? That's kind of Denzel. If 5 is really open, if 4 is pretty open, 5 is really open. So I kind of just threw a dart at the board and wound up with Guy Pearce for The Brutalist. I really don't know too much about his performance. He is a great actor. I believe this would be his first nomination. And I think if he gets in, he's getting uplifted by all the support for The Brutalist. I can't remember if he got a SAG nomination. The SAG nominations for supporting actor definitely had a few surprises. I think the fact that The Brutalist is clearly in the race, it's just a lot of people really like his performance. So I think that could help it. A lot of honorable mentions here. We have Jeremy Strong for The Apprentice, who almost has a better shot than Sebastian Stan. Because people are really clinging to that performance in the movies particularly. I hear he is a scene stealer. It's probably easier to avoid like the political guilt or uncomfortability that they might feel with Sebastian Stan as Donald Trump, whereas Jeremy Strong, I'm forgetting the name of his character. That lends a lot of help when the name of the other character is a pretty big name. It's kind of that energy of a lot of momentum is going towards his performance. I believe he did get a SAG nomination, as did the other actor who I was not expecting to be in this race, but I think because he got a supporting actor nomination, maybe people vote and go, oh, okay, yeah, Jonathan Bailey for Wicked. They could be straight, they could be gay, doesn't matter. You're attracted to that man when you see him walk in that movie. He has so much charisma. He is great. He does have some really small notes, and I think the fact that he got that surprise SAG nomination definitely now puts him in as a possibility. Clarence Macklin for Sing Sing is another one. I really did connect to his performance. I believe actually he was one of the writers on the movie, and he's an actual prisoner. He has actual experience of being in the system, for lack of a better word. I'm sorry if that phrasing is, but he has a very good understated performance, but you could still feel it so much. So I think that could get him in. And then Conclave, Stanley Tucci, in a very similar note, gives a very, very, very subtle performance. This category is competitive, and I hear more people talking about other parts of Conclave than Stanley Tucci. And Conclave is a big ensemble, so that definitely makes it tough when thinking of people outside of Ralph Fiennes. Because Stanley Tucci, you don't hear that name and you go, oh, Stanley Tucci is a heart. He's a sweetheart. So I'd be happy if he got in. Let's move on to supporting actress, because, man, I do so much of this. My number one supporting actress predicted nominee is somebody who I think a lot of people feel pretty confident between two people, of either of whom I think have a pretty equal chance to win. So right now, the only reason I have the other person at number 2 is because Zoe Saldana for Emilia Perez has been in the race longer. Like I said earlier, from what I hear, she really is the lead in this movie, and I hear she's phenomenal. She's been in this industry for such a long time. I love her as an actress. She does a lot of great work. Say what you will about Avatar, but she is phenomenal with the motion capture. She's great with the makeup in Guardians. Whether people love the movie or not, it's supposed to be very, very good in Emilia Perez, and is probably the lead. So I think with a powerful performance like hers, I think that's why I have her right now at number 1. But I wouldn't be surprised if number 2, of all people, Ariana Grande, in the role of Wicked, wins the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress, because I think everybody's head kind of turned when Ariana Grande got cast, but then you see the movie and they all auditioned. She auditioned for this part and got it, and you can see it. She is genuinely, I think, my favorite performance in that movie. There are a lot of subtleties, a lot of big moments. That's just part of the character, but it's those small moments where she's hiding pain. I'm thinking like in No One Mourns the Wicked. Like there's like one smile or two in there that's like you could feel it, and there's just so many memorable notes to her performance, and people love this movie, and people like this movie is gonna change Ariana Grande's career as an actor. She started out as an actor on, things like Nickelodeon, but still Zendaya did Disney Channel too. So people forget, wait, these pop stars can act too? And yeah, she can. She's good in this movie. Dramatically, comedically, she sings, she dances, she does it all. Zoe Saldana actually does a lot of that too, because it is two musical performances fighting for each other, which is very interesting now I think about it, but I would not be disappointed to see her win. I loved her performance. I would also love to see Zoe Saldana win because I love her as an actress and I've seen more of her other work. But Ariana Grande was a genuine surprise in Wicked, and I don't think an unworthy one. Going on to the rest of the list, number 3 right now, I have Monica Barbaro for A Complete Unknown, who also maybe doesn't do as much singing and dancing, but does sing in the movie, and she sings very well, and she has so many good moments in A Complete Unknown. She is a really surprise. I was hearing a lot of good things about her performance, and when you see her in Top Gun Maverick and you see her in this, it's a very different vibe. It's a very, very good understated performance, but also not so understated. She's great in this movie, and I would not be disappointed. Right now, I have 4, and I admit I did forget about her performance because she plays such a small role in the movie, but I've seen her enough in the race, and the fact that people point out she's the only major female supporting player in Conclave. But then when I do think back on that scene, and a scene that calls out the gender or lack thereof inclusion in the Catholic Church, that's a great performance. I don't know too much about her career, so I don't know how much that helps her, but she has a standout scene and is the only woman, well, not the only woman in Conclave, but the only one with a real punch. And when she gets the chance to punch, even if you forget about it, because I admit I forgot about it, but when you do remember about it, it's oh yeah, I did get punched there, because that's what she does in the movie. She punches everybody in the face, leaves, and then it's okay, yeah, I hear her, because she is the only woman who is vying in Conclave. That is one thing against Monica Barbaro, is that there's also Ella Fanning, it's Ella Fanning, not Dakota, in the movie, and she's also great, but I think enough of the momentum has gone towards Monica Barbaro's favor, and again, she gets the advantage of she sings. 3, 4, I think they're pretty good. Monica Barbaro, Isabella Rossellini. If either one of them get snubbed, sure. If both of them do, that's definitely a surprise to me. But you know what? I hear also it's about really 3 powerful female leads, so I think that could lend credence to Selena Gomez also getting a nomination for Emilia Perez. Good on the pop stars getting in this year. I've heard so many great things about her in Only Murders on the Building. Another actor with a Disney Channel background, but she's also proven she's a great actress. So I haven't seen the movie yet, but I believe that her performance is powerful. Same with a lot of these other honorable mentions, which is for some of these movies I haven't seen, some of these movies I have seen, but I have seen all these actresses in movies, if that makes any sense. So Felicity Jones for The Brutalist, she's an honorable mention. I have not seen the movie. I heard she's in the second act, which people don't like as much, and also it's a long movie, so maybe they don't get there. But I heard she's great. She's a great actress. She has a former nomination. She's a Star Wars star. Cool. Margaret Qualley for The Substance. I don't think people can deny the fact that she has a good chance, because yes, Demi Moore is the core of that character, but she wants to be this character, so Margaret Qualley gets a lot to work with, and she has a lot of charisma, as she always does. She does make bold choices, and those two characters are intertwined. You can see the through line. You can see the through line through those performances, but then also notice the differences. And I think that's a very cool thing. Daniel Deadwyler for The Piano Lesson. I don't know too much about the movie. I do know that Danielle Deadwyler was snubbed for Till, and I think that could lend her a lot of help is getting this nomination for The Piano Lesson, which is, I believe, another Netflix movie. I've heard it's great, but unfortunately, it's kind of fallen out of the race. But a lot of the campaigning has been going towards her. So she could get in because of that. After seeing Till, I honestly, like, in a different year, that performance could have gotten nominated, and she didn't. Or, no, that performance could have won, and she didn't get nominated. I think a lot of that energy could be placed towards her. And then finally, another person who is a former nominee, I think from a similar year, 21, a couple of years ago, Anjanou Ellis-Taylor for Nickel Boys. She was in King Richard. She did not have a controversial moment on stage, so that helps her. Nickel Boys is a movie that is definitely in this race more than something like The Piano Lesson. I hear she's great as a standout in that movie. It's just a tough category, so it's hard to say. Right now, I guess I don't have a lot of black actresses, but a lot of Latin actresses on this list. This is a pretty wide open category, with two exceptions, which are the two locks of Zoe Saldana and Ariana Grande. We are done with the acting categories, but I still think we are in that like main category type energy, because like when people like exclude original screenplay and adapted screenplay in the above the line categories, that kind of annoys me, because writing is such an integral part of the industry. Every category is integral, but writing is something that your average moviegoer can notice. So I'm going to start off with original screenplay. Even if this movie didn't have a chance of winning Best Picture, which it most certainly does, I will be shocked if Anora does not win Best Original Screenplay for Sean Baker. I think it's the type of movie that, man, this must have been a hard movie to direct. It must have been a hard movie to write. And I think it is very clearly original. I can see how crazy it would be to write. It just has that type of energy of, wow, this movie is original. It is out there. It makes a lot of choices. And at this point, I think it's a runaway favorite to win this category, and I'm not going to be disappointed. Right now, I have a number 2, Jesse Eisenberg for A Real Pain. I can't remember if he co-wrote this movie as somebody, but he did do a very good job at writing this movie. Another very bold movie getting in is The Substance. I mean, who knows? Maybe this movie sneaks in a win for this category. If it's not Anora, I think A Real Pain just feels like more of a... And they're going to go with something like that's like a bigger swing with Anora or Substance for the win. A Real Pain is just a safer nomination, I suppose. But Coralie Fargret might not get in for Best Director. I definitely acknowledge that. I know it's a risk putting her in there. But do I think she gets in for Original Screenplay? Absolutely. I think that is 1,000% safe. It did win the Screenplay Award at Cannes. And there's nothing that you can't say about this movie that it isn't original. 4 is just another, like, you know, it's a big movie. In the race, The Brutalist. I mean, it's probably another case of it's a very hard movie to write, from what I understand. So I think it's Brady Corbett who did writing and directing on that. So it'll probably, like a lot of other cases, like, you know, translate from the writers and directors, like, you know, it's their baby. So, and 5 is one I'm putting in as a surprise from the WGA nominations, because I thought there was a lot of surprises from there, and because they came out while nominations were still going on, again because of the delays, I think enough people could like go, you know what, we did like Challengers, we do really like that movie, and I think the originality of that movie could get it in as a surprise nomination for Best Original Screenplay. Out of the 3 movies, Challengers was a surprise, My Old Ass was a surprise, and that's one of my favorite movies of last year. It's Civil War. Like, I'm surprised that the writers remember that movie, but Alex Garland is a great writer. If that movie released later in the season, I think that movie is a huge contender. Out of those 3 of the surprises, I think Challengers has enough of that like wild card energy to get in. Honorable mentions include, I guess, those other 2 guys I mentioned, All I Imagine Is Light, an international contender, September 5, because that is definitely a contender in a number of other areas. The Seed of the Sacred Fig, which is, I believe, another international movie. And this one I just threw in there because I hope so. It's one of my favorite movies from last year. It's a very writer movie, which is Saturday Night for Jason Reitman and Gil Kenan, and I really love that movie. And right now, if it has anything, it does get a screenplay nomination, but it's a pretty tough category. Moving on to adapted screenplay is another one. I actually do think the winner is pretty safe. Sure, I might think Anora has a better chance to win Best Picture, and there's no way it's not winning original screenplay. And Conclave, I believe it was based off a book. I've heard it's a very good book, and that feels like a writer's movie with just all the moving pieces going on. There's several languages switching in and out. There's just a lot of tension. There's a lot to adapt there, I'm sure. So I feel like Conclave, it's not missing anything. So if there's one award that Conclave walks away with, I'd say it's adapted screenplay. Number 2, I have A Complete Unknown, which I believe James Mangold, I think he had a co-writer on this movie. I'm forgetting. I'm sorry. But he got in for Ford v. Ferrari for producing it. I don't think he got in for writing it. But people really like A Complete Unknown. I believe that was based off a book. And Bob Dylan is a very hard character to write. So I think because of that, because it's a movie that people really enjoy, I think that could very well get in for, A Complete Unknown. Number 3, I'm surprised this isn't a lock on other people's lists because, sure, John M. Chu, I guess, might be a surprise nomination for Best Director, but, I mean, Wicked. You're adapting the book, you're adapting the stage play. There's a lot to adapt there, and I think they did a great job. I mean, for me, having seen, the Broadway show, where it is, because what people have pointed out is that the movie is the same length as both halves, but the way it's written, the way it's paced, it's wonderful. You don't notice a thing. So I think that type of talent and the fact that it's Wicked, it's already a huge contender. If it's a possibility to win Best Picture, it's not missing a screenplay nomination in my eyes. Number 4 is a movie that feels like a adapted screenplay nomination, even if it wasn't a picture contender. Nickel Boys. It has that right type of energy for me. And then 5, I do think this is gonna retain its nomination from a couple of years ago. That's Dune Part 2. I mean, it's another very beloved source material. They had a lot to adapt there. Some of it is inside baseball, but I think with Dune Part 2, you really do get engrossed in that world more. And that it's the scope of that story, that's got to be very hard. There's a lot going on in that story, but Denis Villeneuve and his co-writers did a great job adapting. Some honorable mentions: Amelia Perez. I think it might be a snub here. It still is very likely to get in. It could swap places with Wicked. Sing Sing was based off of a magazine article. Also has that, even if it didn't get in for Best Picture, it still could get an adapted screenplay nomination. It is a movie about being performative, and a lot of that does come down to the script, which they bring up in the movie. I'm Still Here, which is another international contender. We have gotten international contenders sneaking into the screenplay categories. I don't have any in my picks. I think Amelia Perez is a bigger shot, but I could still definitely see both of them getting in. I have right now, as sort of a combined one of animated movies I would love to see get in, The Wild Robot being an adaptation of the book, and Inside Out 2, which is the last animated movie to get an original screenplay nomination at the Oscars. Yeah, it's been 10 years, guys. Animation is cinema. Get on it. And I have accepted that The Wild Robot is the frontrunner in that category. And those are both movies I love, even if Inside Out 2 is my 1 or 2 right now of the year. And then one that I am including because of its surprise from the WGA nominations, and it does feel like a very distinct writer's movie. It's a comedy, so that could help it, spice it up, is Hitman. Glenn Powell and Richard Linklater did a great job with that movie. So if it got in for this, the WGA nomination definitely shows that people haven't forgotten about this movie. Sure, maybe does it have a great chance at other major categories? No. But people really enjoyed that movie, and I think that type of enjoyment could lend to it getting a nomination. Time to get to the more technical crafts categories. My first crafts category on the list, which I have as Best Cinematography, which I'm surprised this is not number 1 on more people's lists. Sure, it won before, but Dune Part 2, Greg Fraser, you better get nominated. People rightfully thought that he was snubbed for the Batman. You could not like Dune Part 2 as a movie, but you can't say that movie ain't pretty. And he already won it first time, which might lead to him not winning, but I think there's no way that he doesn't get in for Dune Part 2. A similar movie that has a similar scope is The Brutalist. From everything I've heard, that movie is beautifully shot. I hear a lot of people having that pegged as number 1 to win the category. So, I could see that. Coming in at number 3, I have a movie that I think that is going to see its love in the crafts category, even if it doesn't in Best Picture, because Nosferatu's cinematography was gorgeous. Robert Eggers knows how to shoot a movie. The Lighthouse had an incredibly way of being shot, and that did get a nomination for cinematography a couple years ago. So I think it lends credence. I think Nosferatu made a bigger splash than The Northman, which was a pretty movie, but people forgot about that movie by the time it came out. So that's why. And it's a movie that has a legacy to it. And you know what? The shadow stuff that people keep poking fun of with Nosferatu, that still is a very cool technique. And it's a period movie. It's getting it. Number 4, A Complete Unknown. James Mangold's movies always look good. They have a very distinct look to them. With the way it's shot, A Complete Unknown still feels different than his other movies, but the cinematography is pretty damn good. His movies always look good. They always look clean. A lot of other people, cinematography, a lot could happen. A lot could change. Conclave, I have that in. I do remember a lot of the shots. There are a lot of, really memorable moments. Edward Berger won, not him personally, but his movie won for cinematography a couple years ago when somehow Maverick and the Batman got snubbed, which was weird. So I think that lends to Conclave getting in again. It is a very good-looking movie, and it's a very complicated movie to shoot with a lot of moving pieces. So I think that lends to it getting a nomination. Other honorable mentions includes Emilia Perez. It's part of the performative nature. Gonna just jump to Wicked because that movie also looks beautiful. And then the other movies that might not get a ton of nominations but still have a chance, Nickel Boys and Maria. That director does usually have some very pretty looking movies. So, and I don't know too much about Maria again, but we're thinking about the director's last movie, which I have seen, Spencer. That movie does look beautiful. So, sure, I could get a nomination for cinematography. Do I have it predicted? No. I have Dune Part 2, The Brutalist, Nosferatu, A Complete Unknown, and Conclave. Moving on to editing is another one. I have Dune Part 2 at number 1. I'm surprised that in the crafts categories, there's not more Dune Sweep. Dune Sweep became started the whole Everything Everywhere at Once sweep, Oppenheimer sweep, Barbenheimer sweep, whatever. Dune started that trend, and editing as a category, I don't know why I didn't predict it years ago. There's a lot going on in Dune. It's a big movie. The only reason it might not win Best Editing is because it came out a while ago. And Dune has a lot of moving pieces to it. So, yeah, it could get in for editing along with that. Same with Conclave, which a lot of people have pegged to win this category. I guess that surprises me a little bit, but it is a very good movie, so obviously by nature the editing is very notable. A movie that I saw on a lot of people's lists for editing in particular is September 5. So I think because of that love for the editing in this movie specifically, even if it's not a guarantee for Best Picture, editing, it seems like there's a lot of good pieces with the editing in that movie, because just from the lists I've seen it on, the way people have talked about the editing and the cuts in that movie, I think that's pretty safe there. Moving on to number 4, Emilia Perez. Another safe one, just because voters enjoy the movie, so it's going to get in potentially because of that. And then Nora. I think outside of it's one of the few crafts categories I do think Nora has a pretty good chance in. There's a lot of moving pieces with the editing, so I think it gets in there. Honorable mentions, The Substance. That is a movie that has some very distinct editing, so I'd be very happy if that movie got in. Wicked, just, a lot of moving pieces, big energy, a lot of VFX to work with, so it'd be a very worthy nomination. The Brutalist, big scoping epic. How do you pace that? That would be a worthy nomination. Challengers. That is a movie that has almost like a music video like feel to it, and the way, and that is a very hard movie to structure. So yeah, it could get nominated for that. I saw it on some lists. So, and then A Complete Unknown, because it's a very, Ford v Ferrari won for another Mangold movie won for this category. So A Complete Unknown could too. Best production design. Now this is one where we're switching from Dune sweep to what I think could be Wicked sweep, because I don't see how you don't give Wicked the Oscar win for Wicked. The second I saw that library set, I'm like, oh, I love the way these sets look, because it is something that you're taking what is on a stage, and a very big stage, because Wicked is a big production, but then you're making that scale so much bigger. I'm surprised just how much I liked the look of certain places. People love the world of Oz anyway, but like number 2 is still Dune Part 2, because that movie has a lot going for it there. Dune Sweep, The Brutalist. I don't know too much about why the production design of that movie. It is a period piece, so I think that, probably a period piece. I saw it on enough lists that it seems like a safe bet. Number 4, Nosferatu. Not just a period movie, but a gothic period movie. Horror. So yeah, I think Nosferatu has a lot going for it with the production design, so I think it's another cast category. I think it's pretty likely to get in. And Conclave. Like, it is a movie where the setting plays into the tension of the characters, of them all being locked in. And it's a movie with a lot of, whether you like the Catholic Church or not, they make pretty buildings. Moving on to some honorable mentions. I wrote down as my first one Saturday Night, because that movie has some awesome production design, because the production design is very much a key part of that movie, with how they keep moving in and out. There's so many moving pieces going around. All that comes to production design. Gladiator 2, it's a big movie. The Coliseum, people know that building. Even though it's fallen off for Best Picture chances, it still could get in for production design. And then I wrote down Sing Sing, because Sing Sing is a movie that is about being in confined spaces. So I think that lends credence to, and they used the actual sets of Sing Sing Reformation rehabilitation facilities for the movie, so they shot on location, so I think that could get some love for it. So yeah, Sing Sing I think has a decent chance. Unfortunately, it's not on my predicted list though. And another one that I think, even if you don't think the movie gets in for some of the big categories that I am taking big swings with, I don't think even people that think the movie was garbage, I don't think anybody can deny that The Substance should win for hair and makeup. I'm just thinking of the ending of that movie, and the ending, the ways they push it. I don't want to say too much more, because I think once you see it, you'll see why this movie should win. It's getting a nomination. It's probably going to win. Another movie that has a lot going on with it, with A Different Man, with the hair and makeup, is A Different Man, excuse me. A Different Man is obviously taking the play of something like Flowers for Algernon, where Sebastian Stan gets the procedure to look more normal, whereas I hate that I'm forgetting the actor's name, but the other actor who has the more deformed face, there's a lot, I'm sure there's a lot going on there, and probably a lot of technical stuff that hair and makeup people are gonna adore, and it's and it was on the short list, I know that, so I think A Different Man is pretty safe there. It just, there's just some movies where when they're talking so much about appearance, and not just physical appearance in terms of costume, but physical facial appearance, that lends a lot of help to hair and makeup. So I think that's why I think it's a pretty safe nomination. Wicked, she's green, but also, there's also a lot of other things going on with Wicked. So yeah, it's getting in. It's a big movie, got to make them look pretty. It's another part of it. There's, it's a lot of hair and makeup to do. Everybody looks good. Amelia Perez, I admittedly don't know as much about why this would be, but it's a movie I'm sure about appearance to some extent, transitioning from a man to a woman. So I think that could lend some credence. A movie I have not brought up yet, and is one that it just has the type of energy of, oh yeah, if this movie gets in for hair and makeup, you know why. Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. It's a Tim Burton movie, so of course any Tim Burton movie is probably eligible, but I saw the movie and the hair and makeup looks great. Catherine Zeta-Jones' character, who plays Beetlejuice's ex-wife, the way that the stitches on her are great. Willem Dafoe's makeup is great. There's a certain camp to it, which is great. I think it was at least nominated for the original movie. So it might not have a chance in a lot of other categories, but it's a Burton movie. So of course the hair and makeup I think has a decent chance. Other honorable mentions, Nosferatu, I suppose, is, I think, funny enough that like it's a movie that's higher up in the other crafts categories being a horror movie, but then the substance, it's all about it. Waltzing with Brando, don't know too much about it, but they made the guy look like Marlon Brando, so it could get him for that. And then The Apprentice, they had to make Sebastian Stan look like Trump, so it might get in because of that. Because he's a person with a very distinct, very ugly appearance, and they somehow made Sebastian Stan look like an ugly man. Moving on to Best Costume Design, we're flipping back to the Wicked train, because there's just a lot of memorable costumes with Wicked. It's a very unique world. Spoiler alert, Dune Part 2 is my number 2. I could see them being like, you know what, we gave Dune... Actually, wait, no. Dune didn't win for costumes because that was the same year as Cruella. So in a different year, Dune would have won that. And it still has a very good chance because the costumes in Doom are very memorable. But yeah, Wicked, there's a lot. Costumes play a very important symbolic role with it, and there's a lot of iconography to them. I mean, you think of the Wicked Witch, and you think of this stage play, there's a lot to do with those costumes, and they did quite a lot with it. Moving on to another contender, Gladiator 2. I mean, it might not have a chance for Best Picture again, but there's a lot to do with Gladiator 2 and the costume design to make it feel believable, and from what I hear, they did. Conclave is another, this is one I think Conclave has a pretty good chance to get in for a crafts category, because, I mean, there's just a very distinct and memorable appearance to all those robes. Got to make sure they all fit everyone nice and tidy, and it's you do remember the costumes from that movie, even if it's, not because it's like a bold costume, but it has to stick to a certain line, and that could get it a costume design nomination because of that. And then bouncing off of the hair and makeup train, Beetlejuice. I mean, the costumes in that are pretty damn great. It's not high up on a lot of people's lists for either this or hair and makeup, but when you think Beetlejuice, you think of the way he looks. So I think that, and that's just for Beetlejuice himself. I forgot to mention, at one point, I thought Michael Keaton could be a dark horse chance to get a supporting actor nomination. And I don't think that's super likely. But if it does happen, you come back to me and you'll be like, you had something going on there. Other nominations or other contenders, a complete unknown. This was one that was a lot of people's safe bets. I don't know. I mean, it's a period movie. Bob Dylan has a very memorable look, but I just didn't see it, so I didn't put it in there, but it could get in. Nosferatu, another period movie. Probably the most corset-y movie. There's always a movie with corsets in this category. Emilia Perez, obviously. Movie I haven't gotten to mentioning yet that is in a lot of technical categories. Blitz, that's a period movie, World War II. A lot of people think this is pretty safe. I'm not sure. I just wasn't feeling the energy with it, with Blitz. I think I do have it pegged in for one category. It fell off the race with a lot of major categories, but it could get in here, but I don't see it. And one movie I forgot to write down as an honorable mention is The Substance, because Substance is all about physical appearance. And obviously the hair and makeup is crucial to that, but costumes are also a very big part of that. A lot of people did The Substance costumes as their Halloween costume, so that lends a lot of credence. Best visual effects is one that at one point people had Gladiator 2 in, and people thought, well, if Gladiator 2 is going to get in for Best Picture, how is Dune Part 2 going to get in for Best Picture? And then Dune Part 2 kept staying on those lists, and Gladiator 2 fell off. But, well, okay, I Gladiator 2 on this list at 5. To jump back to 1, which is what you should do, is Dune Part 2. It won the last time. It's a sci-fi world. It has great effects. It's probably going to win. Number 2, I have is these movies really should win at some point, but they just always come against like movies that like have, I don't know, just more Oscar-y buzz. Is Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. This is the first one I've gotten to see of this series with the motion capture of the apes, and it is incredible. Like, I've seen the clips from the other movies before. I need to catch up on them, but it's great. My number 3 is, I'm surprised this isn't on some people's list because even whether you like Marvel or not, obviously I do, but every year there's a Marvel movie. They get at least one movie nominated for Best Visual Effects for however many years now. And the only Marvel movie that came out this year, because of the strikes, was Deadpool and Wolverine. And I genuinely think the effects were great. It's going to be nice to see a Deadpool movie finally get a nomination. Cassandra Nova's effects were really cool. There's a lot going on per usual. A Marvel movie always gets nominated. So yeah, it's pretty safe. I already mentioned Gladiator 2. That's at my 5. What I have at 4 right now, Twisters. A movie that I was really surprised by. I think it won for VFX back in the 90s. Don't quote me on that. But it is a movie that did have it. It's one of those few blockbuster movies that, I just like don't know. It's like, how do you make like a Twister revival like as good as it was? I mean, yeah, it doesn't connect to the original, but you really don't need to. When the whole premise is, we just make a movie about Twisters and the natural drama that comes with that. And I think this movie captured that very well. The effects were great. It was the first and so far only movie I've ever wanted to see in 4DX. That lends a lot of credence. It looked great in IMAX. The Twisters, the movie is not you don't buy the movie if you don't buy the fact that they're in a Twister. You buy the fact that they're in a Twister. It's a movie that had a $200 million budget, and I'm not complaining. You can see it on the screen. This movie made a good splash in the box office. VFX is usually a category for that. So I think Twisters gets in for that. Other honorable mentions, I really was this close to including Alien Romulus, but because it has some great practical effects. Who doesn't love the aliens? The way they look. But ultimately, I put Gladiator 2 back in there as I guess it's a little bit more subtle, although I think they have sharks in the arena, so it's like, sure. Wicked, because, and I know some people are complaining about the effects of the animals, but the effects otherwise I think are pretty damn good. And the animals I still think you buy well enough. And I think I still like the fact that they made the animals look like animals in that movie. Maybe you don't buy it 100%, but you buy it well enough to make it work. And then I wrote Mufasa down because The Lion King got in. The Jungle Book won, but at this point, it's a tired thing. I think The Lion King proves that without a human, it's hard to connect to realistic-looking animals trying to sing and dance. Yeah. Moving on to original song, which is actually a category I feel like I usually know original song a little bit better, but this year I really don't know that much about the nominees other than this is a pretty safe place for Emilia Perez to win. I believe the song that is pegged to win for this is El Mal. I haven't seen the movie yet, but from what I understand, it's the song that's being pegged that they're campaigning for the most. I don't know much about this movie, but when I saw the person who wrote the song, and it's on the lists, that's why I'm putting The Journey from the 688. Why is this movie on my list that I've never heard of the song? It's a Diane Warren song. She always gets nominated in this category. Will she ever win? Probably not. She already won an honorable one because people keep nominating her songs, but never like them enough to win. And, sometimes I think that shows. We have our animated entry, and it's not Disney. It is Kiss the Sky from The Wild Robot. I really do enjoy the song in the context of the movie, and I think it stayed in the race that, I think people really like the music in The Wild Robot. I'll get to that in a second. so I think Kiss the Sky is pretty safe. I can't remember who wrote the song and who sung it, but I remember the song, which is the most important thing in a category like this. Elton John made a documentary, Never Too Late, which I thought was the song he did for the Lion King 2019, but I guess he did another, Never Too Late. I don't know. But I saw this on people's lists, so I'm like, sure, Never Too Late. From Elton John, Never Too Late, which is a music documentary, which he made an original song for. I love Elton John. I'm not complaining. And then this one I almost went note for Variety's list, but I just kind of want to have something my own in there. And if Amelia Perez is a big original musical, because Wicked is going off of the stage song, so they're not original songs. So I think Amelia Perez could get in a second song for, I believe it's Mi Camino. I need to judge it for myself once I see the movie, but I think it has a lot going on for it. The movie that was on Variety's list, and it is a movie that I remember seeing the trailers for, although I missed it, was Kneecap. It's a movie about Irish rappers, and I think the song is in like natural like Irish, so that's pretty cool. Twisters had a lot of original songs to it, so it could get in because of that. Challengers, we're going to be talking about that in a second, but Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross did write an original song for that. It was on the short list, so sure. And Will and Harper, because, people like seeing the opportunity to maybe see Will Ferrell win, or sing, I'm sorry. I don't think he wrote the song, but I hear so many good things about this movie. I can't wait to see it. Not just because I know a Temple alum that worked on the movie, genuinely, which is awesome. But outside of that, it seems like Will Ferrell really did the work and just accepting a trans woman who became his friend, or who was his friend, and his friend became a woman, and he accepted that, and he wanted to take in the questions. Who would have thought? And don't have too many more categories at this point, so let's move on to original score, where the movie that I think for a while people were like, nah, people kind of forgot about this movie, but then people couldn't forget about the music, and at this point, because of that, I think it's getting in. Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, they killed it with Challengers. They won deservedly for The Social Network and for Soul, along with Jon Batiste on Soul's part. But, how do you not put in Challengers for this category? You hear the music, and whether you like that movie or not, you remember the music. It is some of the most memorable music I've heard from this past year. Challengers is... I have some issues with the movie, but the score is definitely not one of them. From what I've heard, I think I've heard some of the score from the trailers for The Brutalist, and it does seem pretty good. It seems like what a lot of people are pegging to win this category. And for a grand epic, it probably is pretty integral, so it seems like a pretty safe nomination for there. The Wild Robot, the score, I believe it's Chris Bowers who did the score. It's not John Powell, who does a lot of DreamWorks movies, but the score for The Wild Robot is phenomenal. And after Across the Spider-Verse got snubbed in this category this past year, if one animated movie doesn't get in for this category this year, I'm going to be sad. Amelia Perez, it's an original musical. The song's probably going to win. So wouldn't it make sense for the score to get nominated? And then 5 is Conclave, which is an interesting one, because when All Quiet on the Western Front surprise won that category, I didn't like it, because I didn't like the score. Even though it is a very distinct score, which is probably why it won this nomination, won that year, out of nowhere, surprising, because even though people didn't like Babylon, people love the score for Babylon. But doesn't matter, All Quiet won, so it's the former winner coming back. That doesn't always happen, but in this case, I believe it's the same composer. I'm forgetting on his name, but his score for Conclave is very memorable. It is used in the trailers a lot, and I think it does work just enough. And then, my first honorable mention was a movie I wrote down, once I saw Sing Sing, I wrote down the score. It's, I believe, Bryce Dessner who did it. It's a sibling duo. They often compose together. I believe it was just one of them for Sing Sing. It was on the short list. I'm not seeing it on a lot of people's lists, so that's why it's not on mine. But it is an awesome score. It really adds to the emotion of that movie, so I think it's pretty integral. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that Dune Part 2 should be in this category, but for some reason it was disqualified because it had too much music from the original source material, which I mean, yeah, but it still had one of the best scores of the past year. Hans Zimmer. I still remember the original themes from Dune Part 2, on top of the themes that he reused from the first movie. And Hans Zimmer pointed out the Lord of the Rings movies won 2 scores, got nominated all 3 times, I believe. For incorporating all the themes. That's the thing with like big movies like this. You incorporate the themes from the other parts of the series. But it was disqualified, so it's not on my list because of that. I don't know. Maybe enough people say F to that, and it somehow gets in because of that. Kind of like that one nomination for the actress who didn't have a campaign at all, but people just voted her in because of word of mouth. Forgetting her name. Let's see. Sing Sing. Dune Part 2, which should be here, but unfortunately it was disqualified. Wicked. That isn't a completely original score. Which, to me, it's weird that Wicked is on the short list when it's adapting the themes from the stage show. But then Dune Part 2, which is adapting themes from the other movie, it's just... Sometimes the score category can be incredibly weird. But, with that said, I did really like what they did with the score for Wicked. I believe it was Steven Schwartzman who wrote the themes and the songs for the original play. And he co-conducted the score with John Powell. And John Powell, obviously he's a great composer. I love the How to Train Your Dragon theme so much. And I think he did a really great job at making the score of Wicked. You felt like the notes of the themes at so many points in the movie. So I wouldn't be disappointed if it won, even if it's not a completely original score. It's not anything against Wicked. It's more that, wait, Wicked got in and not Dune? That's weird. The Room Next Door, I believe Pedro Almodovar's movies have gotten in for score before. I don't know too much about the movie, and I haven't heard a lot of like buzz around it, which is why I know it's on a lot of people's other lists, but it's not on mine, even though it's a very notable filmmaker. And then Nosferatu, it had a very memorable score. It was on the short list. It could get in. I feel pretty confident about these 5. One of them, or maybe 2 of them, could get in. I'm sure it's ballsy having challengers at 1, but you hear the score and I think it's pretty deserving. Animated feature, a category where, it's weird. My favorite movie of the year is not my number 1 to win this category, but I'm also not disappointed because The Wild Robot, I have The Wild Robot. Look, here it is, The Wild Robot. I wanted to make sure, I love the design of The Wild Robot, and, it is, sure, Inside Out 2 is maybe my favorite movie of the year. But I also did love The Wild Robot. I can see why it's higher up on other people's lists. I know why it's not on mine. The themes of Inside Out 2 and Anxiety are what make it one of my favorite movies of the year. But don't get me wrong. The Wild Robot still is. It's just less like number 1, number 2, and more like towards like 10. Like, that's still pretty damn good in my book. And you know what? I think after so many years of it being like a Pixar or Disney thing, and I love Pixar. I love Pixar and I love Disney animation. But I think DreamWorks, they knocked it out of the park with The Wild Robot, and it's been the front runner in this category for a while. So I think that's why it's number 1. I think the only reason I don't have Flow at number 2 is because it's Disney and Pixar for Inside Out too. So that's why I have them at number 2. And I could still see a possibility where Inside Out 2, because it is one of the biggest movies of last year, and it's also a Disney Pixar movie, so by proxy, there might be some voters that just don't really care about this category, but they clicked the Disney one. That's why I have it at number 2, even though The Wild Robot has all the momentum going for it right now. I mentioned it before, Flow. I've heard great things about this movie. I cannot wait to see it. I love animation so much. This is a category that's very precious to me. And unfortunately, I haven't seen a ton of the other movies on this list, aside from Inside Out 2 and The Wild Robot. But Flow, I've heard amazing things. I cannot wait to see it. I missed seeing it in theaters, but maybe they'll re-release it. It's, I think, still in limited. I've heard amazing things. I can't wait to see it. Memoir of a Snail is another movie I've heard is great. I've heard it's dark and weird, and that's pretty safe to get in. I've heard enough love in the animation community for this movie. And then number 5, Wallace and Gromit are back. They made another movie. I haven't seen their movies in years, but people love this studio. People love Wallace and Gromit, so it's getting in. Is it going to win? No. It's Vengeance Most Foul is the title of this past one. But I think people are just going to be happy to see Wallace and Gromit back in the race. Usually there's at least 1 or 2 open spots for animation, but the 5 contenders here are pretty, like, all of them have, like, struck a chord in the animation community in different ways. So I think that's what makes them pretty safe. The honorable mentions, Moana 2, because it's a huge movie, and Moana got 2 nominations the last time. I don't think it's as good as the first movie, but I still enjoyed it. I don't think it's anywhere near as good as the first movie, to be honest. But I still had fun with it, and it was a big movie. It's Disney, so by proxy, it could still get in because of that. Chicken for Linda. I don't know much about this movie, but I saw it on the list, so I was like, sure, I should have at least one more honorable mention written down. And then Transformers 1. I don't think it's likely. That movie didn't do super well, but people really like that movie, so I don't know, maybe. If TMNT didn't get in last year, I don't feel super great about Transformers 1 chances, but I want to mention it, at least just in case. And then International Feature is my last category, and it's one where I still haven't actually seen any of the nominees, per usual, but this time I do recognize enough of the nominations just from seeing them in the lists, and, well, the number 1 is pretty obvious. It's Emilia Perez. France didn't flub it. Anatomy of a Fall. That's the movie. That's the one I was forgetting the title of last year. It would have been a tough race if that and Zone of Interest were both in. But France campaigned for a different movie, and then that didn't get in. But then Anatomy of a Fall did get in for Best Picture. Who'd have thunk? But they chose well with Emilia Perez, which isn't a movie in France, but it's made by a French filmmaker, so sure. And it's also a big Best Picture contender, so sure. Number 2, I'm hearing a lot of good things about I'm Still Here, so it seems like a pretty safe number 2. If it wasn't for Emilia Perez, it would probably win this category. And then we have Flow, just mentioned in animation. It's from Latvia. I wrote down I'm Still Here is from Brazil. Flow is from Latvia, which is pretty cool. You know, like, animation is a category where you, like, words, you can tell so much of the story through visuals alone. So I'm glad it got in there. Kneecap for Ireland. Cool. And then The Seed of the Sacred Fig. I heard, hearing a lot of good things about that movie. I saw it on a lot of the technical lists. I believe it was in contention for one of the screenplay categories. So I think it's going to at least get in for Germany. The other 2 honorable mentions I had were Vermiglio and The Girl with the Needle. Holy crap, I know how to talk a lot. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please let me know what you guys think for your predictions. I'm going to try and get this video out as soon as possible. I'm recording this on the Sunday. Nominations are Thursday, so by latest Tuesday, hopefully by Monday. Thank you guys so much for watching. I've been talking my ears off. I've been talking my own ears off, even with headphones. So I'm going to leave you alone. I need to leave me alone. Thank you all so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Stay tuned for more Spinning the Cineweb stuff and the Cineweb Goes 2 stuff. Hopefully I'll be able to do one on the reactions for the nominees, but if not on a reaction on those, then at least I'm going to do another predictions video on who's going to win these Oscars. Yeah. Take care, everybody. I'm going to stop talking now. Bye!